Hey, Steve Riley, welcome to this episode of Great Practice, Great Life. And today I have a fantastic guest, a incredibly well-respected family law lawyer. Some people say she's the best in the state. Some argue that she's one of the best in the country. And she's here with us today to share her insights, her wisdoms, her success strategies on how she built a great practice and great life. So Caroline Black Sikorske, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much for having me. It's really an honor to be here.
It's very sweet of you to say that, but I think there was a lobbying internally inside of Atticus saying, "What can we do to get Caroline on the podcast?" So I really appreciate you joining us. So you have a varied history, an incredible history, and a great reputation, and your firm's got a great reputation. So what I want to do is, if it's okay with you, I'd like to start kind of at the beginning, if that's okay. Let's begin with, when did you decide that you were going to be a lawyer?
Well, I come from a long line of lawyers. It's funny when I tell people this. My father was a lawyer. My grandfather was a lawyer. My uncle and my cousin are judges. I have 3 brothers who are lawyers. I have 2 nieces who are lawyers. So it's sort of the family business. It was like predestined that I become a lawyer. And I knew that I wanted to be a lawyer when I was in about 5th grade because I was looking at one of my dad's law books, and it was just interesting to me. So I thought I wanted to be a lawyer for a long time.
Yeah, so you didn't have much of a choice. It was in the DNA.
Exactly.
It
Yes.
was in the DNA, and your dad was probably saying things like, "Well, when you graduate from law school and have your own practice, like the assumptive close, of course you're going to be a lawyer, Caroline. What
Yeah.
else could you be, right?"
Right. And people joke with me about, so dinner table conversation, what's that like? Is it cross-examination or what? So, yeah.
Yeah, I can totally imagine. So, I would imagine with your father, though, I mean, your father had to be quite the influence for you. So, what type of influence did your dad have on your career and career path?
Yes, my dad was a great influence on my legal career. He was a small town general practice lawyer in Connecticut. He was very well respected. He also did, outside of the legal practice, a lot of community work and a lot of work with politicians. He was a former city attorney, so he knew a lot of people and had a great reputation. That was, for me, a great role model. And the things I took away from him were that being a lawyer was hard work, but it was also immensely satisfying. And he also, at some point in his career, probably when I was small, decided to use the legal field as a springboard to get into other businesses, just sort of, with the idea that being a lawyer was great, but it is maybe not the be all and end all of his life. And so he began to become involved in other small businesses and investments, which I think also had an influence on me as well.
So, when you made the decision to get out, what were some of the factors that made you decide the next career move? Like, what influenced that? Was it a particular mentor, advice, or what was it that encouraged you to do what you did?
Right. So when I decided I wanted to leave the state attorney's office, I had no idea what I wanted to do. Family law was the last consideration in my head. But Susan Buckley, who is now a retired federal judge, she was a state court judge back then. She pulled me aside and said, I know of a firm, their family law, that is looking, and you would be a great fit for them. Because they had called her and said, do you know of any prosecutors or public defenders that are good lawyers? Because we're looking. And she thought of me and talked to me. And I thought, oh, okay, well, let me go interview with them, which was the best decision I ever made. I met Steve Sessom and Miriam Mason. It was a long process of hiring. It was not just one interview, several interviews, and a psychological examination they asked me to do, which I did happily. I found it very educational and very learning experience. But ultimately, they hired me, and I accepted the job offer because I really felt a strong connection with Steve and with Miriam. I felt like I could learn a great deal from them. And Susan Bucklew and I talked about it. I said, family law, what's that all about? I love jury trials. I love being in court. And she said, you'll be in court. It just will be in front of a judge. But what's more important is these two people are sort of icon of family law, and you could learn so much from them. And she was right.
Let's just spend a minute there because if you personally only managing about 15 to 20 cases a year, um, the client selection process must be pretty intense. So I would imagine to choose 15 or 20 cases in a year, how many referrals would your firm or you typically get in a year, and how did you choose those cases?
Right. So, it's so interesting because this is where I learned a lot from Atticus about that process. We had, when I started at the firm, it was a very successful firm. And I didn't have to worry about getting clients. I just had to work hard and meet my billable hours and do the things that needed to be done. But when I probably had been at the firm for 3 or 4 years, I went to an Atticus presentation. I went to a seminar where Mark Powers was talking, and he had like a 45-minute slot. And he talked about all these things, marketing, clients, and what you need to do to, quote, double your revenue. So the next thing I went to was a double your revenue seminar. And one of the topics they focused on was the elevator speech and
Mm,
the selection of clients and the pipeline. And it is absolutely true that we have A, B, C, and D clients. A clients come in the door all the time. We keep them. And then you have your B clients, which, if you have enough space, you keep the B client. C client, if you're sucking wind and nothing's happening and you need a client, okay, but be aware that may not be one you really want to take. And D clients are terrible. And it wasn't always a money consideration. We had an intake process. We had a person who was assigned to interview people for 20 minutes when they called in to set an appointment. And during that 20 minutes, this intake person needed to get information about their finances. But just as important, what kind of person were they? Were they crazy? Were they angry? Were they sad? What was their persona? Because that also put them in the A, B, C, D list. So we did a really good job out of our intake, but it was at Atticus where we kind of really fine tuned A, B, C, and D. As I came back from that seminar and we talked about it, we would have meetings every month, all the partners, and talk about things that are, not necessarily client related. We clearly made that happen through all my 34 years. Every month there was a meeting of the partners to talk about stuff like this. And so I know that we had this discussion, the ABCD client discussion, many times, and in fact, have that discussion with any new lawyer that comes in. And everybody has a different A and everybody has a different B, and they have to figure out what that is. But it was, that's where I kind of really started to see practicing law was great, but the practice of a business in a law firm was as equally important and for me, very interesting.
what were the things that you took in consideration creating or looking for an A client?
So there's the financial side, and the financial side changed from knowing, first of all, what the average cost of my file is. And that means typically if I was, a 5-year associate, how much would a divorce cost? And let's just say in today's dollars, that would be 30 grand
Okay.
um, for a good case. And then as you progress and you increase your hourly rate and you become more experienced and you get the bigger files, your file amount that it would cost somebody could approach 150,000. So you know that going in before you make a decision about whether this is an A person or a B person, and that means tracking that information and making sure it's disseminated. So if I get a file that I think they can't afford me, then I turn it down. So that's the financial side. The other side is the emotionality and what that means in terms of the issues. So everybody's going to be emotional in a divorce. So what you look for are the red flags. And the red flags are the ones that over time and with experience, you get better at identifying. There were many times early in my career where I should have seen a red flag and I didn't. And those are the cases that were very difficult because the client was difficult, had unreasonable expectation. And, these are people, they call it, and they're really good. They're the first impression makers. They sound wonderful. And you're like, I love this person. They're going to be awesome. And then you realize, oh no, they have a deep, dark psychological issue. And you're, oh, what happened? And so, but as the years go on, you really learn, your antenna gets a little more refined and you learn which ones have the red flags. So it just sort of depends on what you see in that file and what the issues are. I stopped taking custody cases about 15 years ago because I just found them to be terrible. I mean, emotionally for me, terrible, emotionally for the parents and the children. And I did not enjoy that anymore. So I stopped taking those a long time ago.